outsiders don't need to come to the funeral, haha. On the night my kind father-in-law passed away, a wake was held. Those were the words of my mother-in-law, who had thrown all the care for my father-in-law onto us, my husband and I. What? Yes, it's a family ceremony, so outsiders should refrain. And remember, Dad's inheritance of $2 million is ours, my sister-in-law said, to which my husband responded in surprise. Brother, sister, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral, and about the $2 million. My mother-in-law replied, seemingly irritated. We're not giving the inheritance to you, the youngest one. You should renounce your right to inherit. That's selfish. I don't care about the inheritance, my husband said, and I continued in a teary voice. Exactly. Let us say our proper goodbyes to father-in-law. Then my mother-in-law glared at me. Why are you, an outsider, acting like family? By the way, Dad told the nurse to call you at the last moment. Could it be that you were having an affair with my father? My brother-in-law and sister-in-law exaggeratedly showed disgust. Ew, dirty. Were you trying to seduce Dad to get his inheritance? Michael, you married a terrible woman. I clenched my fists tightly. To treat my gentle husband and father-in-law so poorly, and even suspect an affair between my father-in-law and me? I couldn't believe such horrible people existed. With a calm voice, I said, Understood, we won't attend the funeral. My name is Mary. I'm turning 32 this year. I met my husband Michael in college through a club we both joined, and we got married. I work in public service, and my husband works in an IT company. We both work and live happily together. Michael, it's about time to bring fresh clothes for your father, isn't it? Oh, right. Thank you always, Mary. On this day off for both of us, after doing some shopping, we headed to the hospital where my father-in-law was admitted. Oh, Michael, Mary, so nice to see you two. Lying on the bed in the private room and smiling, my father-in-law had a stroke last year and is left with paralysis on the left side of his body. Since then, he's been hospitalized and diligently undergoing rehab. It was quite cold outside, Dad. I see. You both take care not to catch a cold. My husband spoke gently. I arranged his clothes and arranged the flowers we brought. Mary, Michael, thank you for always looking out for someone like me. What are you saying, Dad? Don't worry about it. Yes, please let us know if there's anything else we can do. As we were having our usual conversation, the door to the hospital room suddenly opened. Then my mother-in-law, brother-in-law John, and sister-in-law Emily rudely entered the room. Upon seeing us, my mother-in-law said conspicuously, Oh, it's you, Michael, and what was your name again? At her words, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law chimed in. Hey, Mom, that's a bit much, don't you think? Ha ha. Just because she's the leftovers bride, ha ha. That's right. Her name is Maria, right? Ha ha. I kept silent, looking down. We had been married for 3 years, and I had met my mother-in-law numerous times. It's impossible that they don't know my name. Hey, Mom, big bro and sis, stop being rude to Mary, my husband Michael said in an irritated tone. His mother exaggeratedly shrugged her shoulders. Oh, I was kidding. Why are you so mad? A joke. You guys always... Michael tried to continue, but his mother cut him off. Enough! We're going to have a family discussion now. You two are excused. We're family too. Michael protested, but his elder brother shooed us away with a shh gesture. You third wheel and still want to hang around? Get out already, haha. My sister-in-law also chimed in, giggling. Yeah, this discussion doesn't concern outsiders like you. Michael looked upset. He turned to me and said, "Let's go." I bowed to my father-in-law, who was troubled by the situation, and left the hospital room with Michael. On our way home, Michael apologized to me. "Mary, I'm truly sorry for my family's behavior." I shook my head and responded, "No, you're the one who's truly hurt, aren't you?" Michael managed a weak smile at my words. He was born as the third and youngest child. From what he had told me, his mother had always favored his older siblings, and she ignored him most of the time. According to Michael, his mother never attended his school events like parent-teacher conferences or sports days. While his siblings were always gifted expensive new things, he only got hand-me-downs that were old and worn. Even as a child, he had learned not to ask for anything. While his underachieving siblings were funded through private universities, Michael, who was a good student with good grades, was told by his mother to work after middle school and that she wouldn't pay for his tuition for higher education. Michael had to take out student loans and attend a public high school and a relatively inexpensive state university, where he managed to find his current job. When I met his family for the first time after we decided to get married, his mother showed no interest. "I don't care what you do," she had said, not even offering us anything to drink. His brother and sister looked at me with amusement, making fun of me. "You really must be a masochist to marry such a leftover, haha." "Absolutely. You must really have a peculiar type, haha." My husband has always been treated as an inconvenience to his family, a third wheel. This treatment didn't change even after we got married. We were consistently left out of family events such as weddings and funerals. As a result, we were later scolded by relatives for not showing up, asking, "Why didn't you attend?" "But my father always had my back," Michael said, squinting his eyes. When Michael was a child, his father was often away on business trips, hardly ever at home. However, on occasions like Christmas and birthdays, even when Michael didn't receive a gift from his mother, his father always made sure to have something for him. Despite his busy schedule, there were times he took off work to attend Michael's graduation. When we got married, it was only his father who seemed genuinely happy and blessed us. A kind father-in-law, always concerned about us. But to his family, his wife and other children, he was merely a convenient ATM, treated callously. So when my father-in-law fell ill, it was us who took on the task of his daily care and looking after him. "Michael, I promise to look after both you and your father," I told him. Grasping my hand, Michael thanked me, saying, "Thank you. I really appreciate you." Months passed, and then we received a call from the hospital. My father-in-law had suffered a stroke again. By the time we arrived, it was too late. My father-in-law had passed away. Dad, I wanted to do more nice things to you and be a more devoted son." Overwhelmed by grief, Michael cried out, looking at his peacefully sleeping father. I, too, shed tears, remembering the kind words and smiles from my father-in-law. My mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law arrived, but they didn't shed a tear. In fact, they seemed in rather good spirits. "I can't be bothered, so you take care of the funeral arrangements," my mother-in-law said, pushing a funeral home brochure into my hands before swiftly returning home. Although we were stunned, we knew we had to send off my father-in-law properly. We immediately contacted the funeral home and arranged for the wake and funeral. Days passed. After the wake ended and the guests had left, I approached my mother-in-law, now in her mourning clothes. About the arrangements for tomorrow's funeral, I started. Oh, don't worry about that. The funeral director will take care of it, she interrupted. And then she said something shocking. You outsiders don't need to come to the funeral. What? Huh? Michael and I exclaimed in unison. Smiling slyly, brother-in-law John chimed in. Thanks for taking care of Dad all this time, but we don't need you guys anymore. Don't come to the funeral. What? What do you mean? I asked, shaken. Then my sister-in-law Emily continued. Exactly what we said. This is a family funeral. We don't need outsiders. Besides, Dad's $2 million inheritance is ours now. In shock, Michael asked, Brother, sister, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral, and about the $2 million. My mother-in-law replied, seemingly irritated. We're not giving the inheritance to you, the youngest one. You should renounce your right to inherit. That's selfish. I don't care about the inheritance. My husband said, and I continued in a teary voice. Exactly. Let us say our proper goodbyes to father-in-law. Then my mother-in-law glared at me. Why are you, an outsider, acting like family? By the way, Dad told the nurse to call you at the last moment. That's because I was the one taking care of him. But my brother-in-law and sister-in-law snorted dramatically in disgust. Could it be you had a thing with our dad? Ew, dirty. Were you trying to seduce Dad to get his inheritance? Michael, you married a terrible woman. Shut up, Mary is. My husband started in a voice tinged with rage, but my mother-in-law quickly interrupted him. A woman who'd have an affair with her father-in-law and a low-life youngest son aren't family. Don't you dare come near us ever again. I clenched my fists tightly. To treat my gentle husband and father-in-law so poorly, and even suspect an affair between my father-in-law and me? I couldn't believe such horrible people existed. Just as I was about to burst out in anger, my husband raised his voice. Enough! How dare you insult Mary? She took such diligent care of him. It's okay, Michael. I calmed my husband and spoke in a composed voice. We understand your point. We won't attend the funeral. My husband followed suit, with his voice trembling. Yeah, we can no longer consider you family after being insulted like this. We'll pay our respects to Dad at his grave. My husband and I paid our last respects to my father-in-law and left the room. 2 days later, there were multiple missed calls from my mother-in-law on my cell phone. When I told my husband, he said he'd also received some. There's no need to answer those calls. Let's just ignore them. Agreeing with my husband, I didn't pick up any of the calls. However, the calls didn't stop. A week later, just as I was thinking of blocking their numbers, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law showed up at our apartment. What do you want now? My husband asked grumpily. My mother-in-law began ranting, looking as if she'd seen a ghost. We just found out that all of Dad's fortune is yours. How is that possible? At this, my husband calmly replied, Yeah, a lawyer came by and told us everything. In fact, the day after the funeral, a lawyer had visited us and informed us that my father-in-law had left a will leaving all his property to us. We had already started the process of claiming the inheritance. You must have thought that as family, you'd naturally get a share of the inheritance, right? Under normal circumstances, you'd indeed be entitled to a certain percentage, right? That's right. And yet the lawyer said that we have no right to the inheritance, that everything will go to Michael. To my mother-in-law's raging remarks, my husband and I calmly replied, Of course, my father-in-law had asked his lawyer to disinherit you all while he was alive. If inheritance gets abolished, you wouldn't even get the minimum statutory share. Then my brother-in-law, spitting with rage, lunges at my husband Michael. That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
The abolishing of inheritance, it's not fair.
Then my husband answers with a voice seeping with anger.
Bro, weren't you constantly bad-mouthing our frail, elderly father, saying he's useless and should be gotten rid of soon? Our dad kept a record of everything while he was alive. That's... And you were secretly using his bank account while he couldn't move, weren't you? That's a fine reason for inheritance, disinheritance. How do you guys know all that?
Our father-in-law collected evidence and arranged for it to reach us and the lawyer. Michael continues with a look of contempt for his mother.
Did you know that a spouse who's been cheating for years can also be disinherited? Didn't you know that?
Your suspicion about my father-in-law's affairs was because you were having one yourself. Hearing our words, my mother-in-law's face gradually lost its color, turning pale.
It's all because of the terrible things you three did to Dad. It's too late to change anything now,
Michael says grimly. Then my brother-in-law suddenly starts begging, even prostrating himself on the floor.
Mike, please, split the inheritance with me. I need money because my business failed.
My sister-in-law also follows him, her face a mess of tears and snot, clinging to my husband's arm. I apologize for everything. If my husband finds out about my debts, I'll be divorced. Looking down at them, my husband coldly dismisses them.
I won't forget what you guys did to us. I will never forgive you.
Then my mother-in-law, stomping her foot in frustration, screams out, How am I supposed to live from now on? We're family, aren't we? Help me! Michael and I look at each other and say in unison, Family, you say? Who was it that said strangers shouldn't come to the funeral?
There's no way we're helping you guys. Figure it out yourselves,
Michael says and shuts out the three of them. But still, they continue to scream. But as soon as the property manager who heard the commotion came, those three shuffled away, tails between their legs. Shortly after, we, as a couple, received all of my father-in-law's estate and moved to a new place to prevent any further attacks, and we also locked our records securely. This is a story we heard from relatives, but afterward, my brother-in-law apparently begged relatives for a loan, only to be turned down and ended up borrowing money from moneylenders. Now he's being hounded by a group of tough-looking guys. My sister-in-law, her chronic debt finally discovered by her husband, was divorced and moved back home. Now she's reportedly working in a nightclub to pay off her debt. My mother-in-law, after being discarded by her gold-digging affair partner, has aged considerably. These three now live in a run-down, one-bedroom apartment, barely getting by with the bare necessities. But it's no longer any of our concern. On the other hand, a precious baby boy was born to us. With the kindness that my father-in-law showed us, we now want to shower our son with love and live happily ever after.